I'm the great granddaughter of C. Matavadi Krishnan, who's a caste fighter. He was an anti-caste leader back in the day. Like, I've heard stories where Mahatma Gandhi has come to her ancestral home.
Starting a new series today with someone I'm a fan of. Her name's Priyanka Paul. The series is called Do You Want More? You'll figure out what we are doing as we go along, as will I. Priyanka Paul is a graphic designer and illustrator. She has merch of her own. She writes poetry. She's an artist, like, you know, the kind that you can't really box into one thing only. That's one of the reasons I'm a fan. From the Margins is a piece that she wrote, which is a spoken word piece, which is coupled with some really cool visuals. It speaks about how a lot of Indian urban youth, I guess, are more tuned into the activism that pop culture leans on, probably more than what is actually applicable to, you know, our own localities and surroundings in our region. That's my understanding. Whether we are right or wrong, we shall figure soon. And when this cuts, you will now see Priyanka Paul appear somewhere. Yeah. So yeah, okay, fuck those formalities. Let's. So, firstly, thanks for being here, because it's something I'm trying to figure out.
Proud of you.
Do You Want More for me is it's kind of a passion project, because I feel like there's a lot of artists in the world, a lot of creative people, or even just people in general, and not everyone is really pushing themselves the way they can. Like, maybe this sounds patronizing or something to a few people. I don't mean to be, but I really feel like a lot of people have potential and things they can do which they don't really push themselves to, and that's why they never end up doing it. So I wanted to discuss people and projects where I felt like that was done, or, you know, attempted to be done. One such project is your piece on your spoken word piece on a variety of topics, I guess. Anti-casteism, there's a lot of feminism, and of course these are intersectional topics.
Yeah.
So variety of topics. Where were you personally and professionally?
So this was a long time coming. Like, I'd been pondering over it for a huge time, and like professionally I became like the brown feminist artist, and it was just like unidimensional, right? And if your feminism isn't intersectional, it isn't really feminism in the first place. And I didn't want my art to just become like eye candy. That's what it never was. It always, my work has more meaning to it, or at least I aspire for it to have more meaning. And caste is such an important subject that the youth don't really talk about, because it's always been swiped under the carpet, and we don't talk about it. And there's reason that we don't talk about it. There isn't any informational, educational, entertainment content made about caste, and like it isn't in our textbooks. If anyone wants to learn about caste, you have to read like a huge book, and no one wants to do that. So I think From the Margins to me was me exploring caste through my own experiences, and believing that it's an important topic that the youth today and the activist space and people trying to be woke, and caste is an important subject that if you want to be woke, you're supposed to know about this.
Absolutely.
So that's what I did, because when I wrote it, I wrote it as a part of NAPO Remo, which is National Poetry Writing Month. Yeah.
Oh, sweet.
So and then I worked on it a bit more, and then like I made an illustration for it, which I worked on for a long time. And after that, I realized that this could be a video. So I'm usually influenced by hip hop. I'm like a huge fan, but I have zero musical sense. So I wrote it as a rap, but like I don't
it's
really
spoken wordish.
It is a spoken word, but I wanted it to be rap, but it
like
didn't.
It's
I didn't get beats.
It's actually a very fine line. If you
I wanted it to be that, but like I couldn't exactly get the stuff done. So I just made it like a video and got my friend Christy Johnson to make the video, which is a brilliant video.
When I was reading, when you shared the piece, you said this piece is for you to reclaim the caste conversation.
Right.
If I'm paraphrasing maybe.
Yeah, you're right. So what I wrote was that even when caste is spoken about, even when there are literary articles about caste, it's written by upper caste people. Right? There is no caste content or like caste literature which is written by like Dalit writers or marginalized writers, and they are even in the space where they are the people who are oppressed, their writing isn't considered as important. So I mean, I thought, the whole conversation around caste needed to be reclaimed. Like there are women, there are marginalized women talking about caste, and they aren't getting as heard as like upper caste women talking about caste.
Correct.
Upper caste writers talking
because
about caste.
People in upper caste are usually in positions
they're in
of power.
positions of
where
power,
they are
so
heard.
they are easily heard.
Correct.
They are in positions of power in the first place to be heard. And I have like a huge I have influencer background, and I've got followers who are listening to me, so I'm going to talk.
Absolutely.
And I definitely come from a really privileged economic background, so I think that definitely helped.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm like able to even talk about things like this.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you're just so into your own oppression, you don't even know. Right? It just becomes the norm.
So you kind of had a perspective that was kind of unique, that so I guess socioculturally your ancestors come down from a more oppressed background.
Yes.
But right now you're living in a more urban and more, I guess, slightly more privileged.
Yeah, and exactly why.
Than what they had.
Yeah, because I'm in this urban background and I'm privileged, it's so easy to forget these things.
Yeah.
And they'll want you to forget these things, even though they so blatantly exist.
Even in
this society.
like it seems invisible to us, but it's
weird.
very visible and tangible for so many people. In our
like it was really funny. Like I saw a change in how people looked at me after I came out with this poem, because it's not just a poem, it's a proclamation of the fact that I come from an oppressed lower caste background, and automatically people see you differently, and it's so funny.
Okay, so this is not the flow I had in mind, but tell me more about that. Like, what kind of react? Yeah.
It was just like, so I did this book. Okay, it was a collaborative piece with a bunch of people, and it was I don't want to take names here, but the author came up to me in the later part of the book, and she was like, "We are being asked about representation in this book, and if they are like marginalized lower caste or illustrators in it." And she was like, "Are you one?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, I come from this community, I come from this background." But, and like, that's all she cared about. Which isn't really the point. When you want to give representation to people from communities, you look for them. You don't, after you've done your book, find out that someone is from this background. I'm like, oh my god, representation.
And
like,
make it seem like you went out to find that.
Yeah, you didn't do that. If you... Like, the book is about a bunch of Indian women, and there are like amazing Indian marginalized lower caste community tribal women in that book who have been written about. So they should have been illustrated by the same community, marginalized community illustrators.
Correct.
Which wasn't done. And they were just like, oh, golden ticket Priyanka has got some marginalization.
Did you charge them extra? You should have taxed their asses. Is there anything else that we are missing in terms of understanding why the piece came about, especially from you? I want to maybe talk about your ancestry. You mentioned that while describing the piece online.
I'm the great granddaughter of C. Matavadi Krishnan, who's a caste fighter. He was an anti-caste leader back in the day. Like I've heard stories where Mahatma Gandhi has come to her ancestral home. He was against Gandhi during the freedom struggle because Gandhi wanted freedom first. He didn't care about the caste system. But my grandfather, like, he's broken into temples. He established the first Buddhist monastery in Kerala.
I was reading about that. He introduced a lot of Kerala to Buddhism
to Kerala. And then his family converted to Buddhism. So he's a really interesting person. Right? And when I have like conversations about caste, when like with my grandmother, and it's such a flawed conversation because I do not know what she's talking about.
It's a very different...
Like it's like fractured. Because you see like how she sees caste, and like she's so disconnected from that ancestry. Like I have like
Tell me more about that.
Okay, so I was having this conversation about caste in the workplace, and how like in every industry almost even though like say the Brahmin community makes up just like 5% of the Indian population, they take up to 50% of the higher paying jobs in every industry. My grandma was like, it's because Brahmins are like, they study well now. And I was just like
conditioning, right?
I was like, why do you think that is? Right? And this woman comes from a lower caste background, and it's so easy for her to put herself out and destroy her own worth to prove that caste is a good system.
To fit that narrative. Alright. I was reading about your great grandfather, right? Yeah, pretty insane, inspiring stuff. Like,
Yeah.
like the country has a certain number of insane leaders at a certain time.
Yeah.
He
He
sounded
also
like.
started like the first bank in Travancore. Like,
Oh, wow.
he did a lot of crazy
Right.
stuff.
But one of the things, I mean, we've discussed a lot of the, I think, more general societal stuff. One of the reasons, like I was saying, I found it really important and relevant to me was because it seemed influenced by, as well as relevant to Indian hip hop a lot. Influenced by hip hop in general. I don't know who you listen to. But tell me more about that, because I agree with you, and I think this is an aspect of hip hop that I think a lot of Indian artists or Indian hip hop fans don't get. That it's not about the outcome of, like, oh, the way he sings it, I have to have the same accent, or the word he uses, like for example the N word that you talk a lot about. It's not as much about that word. You can't mimic it. You have to understand where it comes from. Because we have our own local slangs which we can use, but a lot of people still choose to use the N word. Being fans of hip hop, I find that very hypocritical, and I find that lazy, and I feel like you're not a fan of hip hop, you're a fan of a trend or a fad. But everyone looks at it as hip hop, and it gives us, who actually try and push for the actual culture of hip hop, it gives us a really bad name. And it's annoying as fuck. But tell me about
the hip hop aspect.
The hip hop aspect.
So often when you listen to scholars, and often in a international space, caste is defined as race. Like when they talk about caste, they use it interchangeably, even though it's not. The dynamics are completely different. But like in an international scenario, it would be used as that. And I see people around me who engage in intellectual debate, and they have so much knowledge about race, and they have so much to say about racism. They have so much to say about Black Lives Matter. And they have nothing to say about the very oppression ingrained over centuries. And this is not to belittle the black struggle at all, but ours has been for centuries, not even like 1 century. Right? And they are completely ignorant of it. They do not know anything about it. They do not want to say anything about it, because more than often they are in privileged positions. And you do not want to criticize a system that you benefit from more than often.
Also, I think, a big reason they latch on to the whole racism struggle is because a lot of people who are a product of that environment kind of found their way of making it look cool to fight against the system. So they are actually, in a great way, they are just latching on to the acting cool part of it, but not why.
Totally. I have like tons of friends who are so into like Kendrick and Kanye, and like if you listen to Kendrick Lamar and you do not understand the struggle that he's talking about, what do you understand? When you say the N word without context, you shouldn't be saying it in the first place, but the fact, when someone tells you not to say it, there's a reason behind it. If you don't understand context, is that it comes from oppression. It's a word rooted in oppression, and that rap music took that word and made it something to be reclaimed. And if you don't understand that, you think it's just a word that's just like cool that you can throw around, that's ridiculous and stupid, and you do not get what rap music was about. Rap music came from the streets. It talked about oppression, talked about the ghetto, and people just throw around words like ghetto like it means nothing. Which is stupid. And the same situation happens in India, and no one has anything to say for it.
Like, it's crazy because a lot of the friends I have from the community, or just online acquaintances, they are hip hop artists and whatever, and on top of that they are also kind of aware of, like you mentioned, race issues in the US. Maybe not anywhere else in the world, but US. But here they're going to share anti-reservation memes. It's so infuriating. But
because it's easy to connect to a struggle which isn't yours, where you don't have to acknowledge that you played a part in this oppression, right? But that's what I'm talking about. If you could relate to that struggle, why can't you relate to the struggle that's happening in your own land within your very eyes? Like in Mumbai, there was like a protest against anti-gun laws, like about in South Bombay, and I was just like, what?
I know.
How does that affect anyone? What are you protesting about?
And people,
and there are people dying,
putting Tika on Donald Trump's photo and all, dude. It's lit. What is happening?
It's like, why do you know about that? Why do you care? and this thing
Media
can be
did.
happening, like the anti-reservation like protests happening and stuff,
Yeah.
and no one has anything to say. Like, I go to Xavier's, and probably shouldn't be saying this because college can throw me out for it, but I don't care. But St. Xavier's gives a 50% minority quota, right?
Okay.
And people often forget that caste isn't reserved to one religion in India. It's equal to every other religion. So the majority
yeah.
of Christians who get into Xavier's on
Are
like
upper
minority
caste
quota
Christians.
are upper caste Christians. They don't deserve that. They don't need that.
Correct.
Right? So what Xavier said is that we're giving 50% minority quota for Christians anyway. So we're not going to give reservation.
Okay.
And they're not
That's
giving
their
reservation.
type. Yeah. I think there were a bunch of students, including you. I think at the beginning of this academic year,
See,
who were,
so no one spoke about this. I read about it in a class group, and everyone was like, "Oh my god!" Someone actually said we finally won. Won what,
What?
dude? Won what?
these are your classmates.
Yeah. So this caste debate happens like all the time, and I'm like, sometimes it's just infuriating, right?
That's
Because
horrible.
people talk about caste like it's some alien concept.
Yeah, like
that
it's-
it doesn't, that they aren't lower caste or like marginalized caste people sitting in that classroom right with you or like
in that same
listening
WhatsApp
to you.
group
It's
or whatever.
crazy.
Yeah.
That's the thing with caste, right? It's visible, but it's also not visible to
Yeah.
some point. Like that's also something I address in the in my poem.
piece,
I
yeah.
talk about I say two first names. What's up with that? Because that's my name, Priyanka Paul. Paul's my dad's name. Because we don't like some sections of in Kerala do not take on like a caste surname.
Right.
Plus my dad's Catholic.
Right.
So Paul is my dad's name. You can't tell what caste I am. You can't tell what religion
Yeah.
I am.
Correct.
Right. So it's super ambiguous.
Yeah.
But caste has so much to do with names and all of that.
For me, it's one of the incidents that triggered my curiosity was when A-List, he's another rapper.
Right.
He introduced me to
Sonic Samuels?
to Soni Sori's struggle
Okay,
and
yes.
her fight against
Yes, she's
the authority.
brilliant, yeah.
And he spoke a lot about it in his rap, so I just want to
Right.
shout him out first. And I want to know, and her struggle and Sheetal Sate's struggle with the Kabir Kala Manch, who
Yeah.
I don't think she's with them anymore, but these were instances that really, like, quote unquote, triggered me in a positive way, I would like to think,
Yeah.
where I started digging and trying to find out
Mhm.
more and being more abreast. You mentioned Rohit Memula. I'm guessing that's one instance that
Right.
left a important mark on
Right.
you. What other instances do you think, like, there's a lot, like, unfortunately that's happened, but what really
all
stands
I
out?
have to say about is that we don't need people to die for caste to be spoken about.
Yeah, that should not be where we are
Right.
as a
We don't need
society.
people to start dying for that.
Yeah.
And that's again what I say when it comes from like caste literature. We assume that there are people within marginalized communities that they can't speak for themselves, and which is why like privileged people have to speak for them. But you
not the
forget
case.
that there are brilliant people that come from these communities, and the only reason you're not hearing them is because the system exists.
So the structure.
Yeah.
I want to get down now to discuss. So when there is an artistic vision, or in general just a dream or an ambition, whether it's artistic or personal or whatever, it sounds great and all. But for me, a big problem I have is that growing up, I didn't get to see enough of what goes into making that happen. The difficulties, the hindrances, and just the blood, sweat, and tears, I guess. So I want to touch upon that. This piece is clearly A, personal as fuck, and B, researched as fuck. Was that the toughest part, or was the writing hard? Because I just want to understand what was the challenges trying to come up with something like this.
Definitely was like this is like my best work. I personally think this is my best work, though the media would say that they think my Goddess series is the best work. But
One
this
of which I have on my
yes, you do.
But yeah.
Everyone sends me
Photos of that
like,
one.
oh look, Enkore has your poster in his room. I'm like, I know.
Yes, he bought it from my website. But yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely put in a lot of thought into it because I wanted to talk about caste for a really long time. But given how, especially after the backlash I got with the Goddess series, I know that I didn't want to fuck with social media.
Sorry, explain Backlash to Goddess series in short.
Right.
4-mark answer.
So I got a bunch of like threats, and people were like, "How dare you draw Goddess Kali in this vulgar way?"
Yeah.
Which I do not see how is vulgar.
Can I use an image of her here
Sure,
while we are?
throw it in.
Yeah.
Use a selfie with your poster.
Yes, perfect. So yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it was, and they were like lewd comments, and it was just disgusting.
Yeah.
And my work was never aimed at offending people.
Yeah, I think I've seen some of them, but they were like draw
a mother,
draw Mother Mary
being raped or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, draw Mother Mary naked, which is stupid because there's Eve right there. She's in the Bible and the Quran. Like,
but
maybe if you read a book, you would know. What is knowledge? And like traditionally, Goddess Kali was drawn by Raja Ravi Verma, who when he drew her also faced backlash.
Oh.
Like, so what we traditionally worshipped as Goddess Kali
was also scandalous at some point.
Yeah, at some point was scandalous.
Yeah.
So you can't really like put a stamp on what is
I think
right
people
art.
just don't understand art in general, and the extremist idiots in general.
What do you mean by vulgar? Like, if you were to go by this definition of vulgar that they have, Goddess Kali is stark naked with her tongue out in like her original way she is depicted. So I'm just like shocked. It's just okay to attack women on the internet and everywhere. So it was just that, and I don't make sensational art. I didn't come here for that. I want you to think when you look at my work, and so I had to pay a lot of attention to that. And caste, again, subject that gets swiped under the carpet. So what would make people look at this? Not like there isn't work out there. People just don't want to look at it. So what was going to make them look at this?
So what approach did you take?
So I had to think about how to make it visually appealing, because at the end of the day, people want to look at something and they want to be like, okay, I'm going to read what's written now. And even the poem, I think, is one of my best works, because I did put in a lot of thought, and I had to be rhyming. I had to have like relatable stuff, like there's a lot of the whole black struggle, which I think is important, isn't it? But because that's relatable, that will catch your eye.
You touch upon like a lot of different topics, from Aryan propaganda to Black Lives Matter, reservation, your ancestry. It's a very intersectional piece, which is what I personally really fuck
definitely with. So like, how do you get all of that together? So I had to think for a really long time. And one day I was just like, I kept gathering like phrases, and then one day I was like, okay, gotta write this down, and I wrote it down. And then as I said, my name's ambiguous. My mom comes from the Thia community, which is an lower caste community. It's an OBC community in Kerala. We have like a huge history of oppression. I don't know if you've heard of the story of Nangeli.
I read about
the breast tax. So she comes from the Thia community as well. So she's like my ancestor. So we have this history of oppression, and I had to go back to my roots to understand my own, where I come from, what my background is, my great grandfather, what all he does. Because when my grandma's you're just conditioned, right? It tells you that. So her story was just like, oh, Mahatma Gandhi and Annie Besant came to my house because my grandfather was a freedom fighter. He wasn't a freedom fighter.
He was a revolutionary.
He was a revolutionary. He was an amazing man. So I had to go back to my past to understand who I am. This is a personal piece, because I had to explore my own identity through it. I had to just understand.
And that's kind of the one angle that's constant. That be aware of yourself.
Right.
And like that's how the
another thing is that there's no caste literature that comes from the like minorities and marginalized sections of society. And even then, I'm at some privileged position, because OBC is not Dalit. And Dalit is because at the end of the day, this is a pyramid. This is a structure built of shame, built on putting down people. And I'm not exactly at the bottom at it. I'm at some sort of bottom where there's a perspective that isn't being spoken about. So I had to be okay where I'm not appropriating someone else's struggle, because I could not do that. And how am I better than any other oppressor?
Correct.
Right? I'm not. That is why it's so personal, because I wasn't stealing someone else's narrative. It was completely me. So I think that was important.
One of the issues that you faced, because you were so hardcore yourself in the piece, like when you mentioned when the piece was exhibited abroad, and it lost a bit of its context and seemed offensive, came across offensive. Tell me about the situation.
So I made the video because it was going to be displayed in a London theatre scene. It was at Ivo Theatres.
No big deal, just swagging out. Sorry.
It was good. It was a big deal. It was nice. And it was it was something that was being introduced to a completely different audience, right? The video launched over there before I launched it in like I launched it on
That I
my
didn't know.
timeline and stuff.
Okay. And it's the same video that's on.
It's the same way. I
everywhere?
just changed the music.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. When I got feedback from the organizers, they were like, it was brilliant because they are Indian people. They're Indian people in the UK.
Okay.
And they were like, you know what? We love the piece, but there were a lot of black folk in the audience who felt a bit offended at the part where there are lines which says this is not a black struggle.
Yeah.
What I don't mean when I mean to say that in an Indian context you would get it,
Yeah.
but in an international context you
sounds
wouldn't
really
probably. It
insensitive.
sounds insensitive,
Yeah.
right? But that's
It wasn't
again
meant
a
for
complete
them
lack of
to-
knowledge of the Indian context right
Correct.
there.
But
So, like in the Indian context, I mean to say is that when you talk about the black struggle so extensively and you forget that there's a struggle right here.
Yeah.
This isn't a black struggle. This isn't an American struggle. This is an Indian struggle right here, and you need to look at it.
And that was the topic of your piece.
Yeah,
that
like,
it's,
exactly.
That with all due respect to
With all
all
due
the other struggles and
Yeah.
Anti-establishment
Right.
kind of movements around the world, you have to do your own to actually contribute and not just be part of a fad or the part of the pop culture aspect of activism.
Yeah, at the end of the day, if you're so passionate about Black Lives Matter, great. I'm so happy you can understand that oppression exists in today's modern world. But you're appropriating another struggle.
Use that
It's not
energy to
yours.
improve
Use
your
that.
own
Yeah. I mean,
world.
right. It's important that we recognize systems exist and that they need to be broken down
Yeah.
to a certain extent.
Absolutely. And just like for me, it's really painful that people are so, like, I understand if some people just think policy on a reservation can be better or whatever, that's a personal opinion, but to act like it's unnecessary, whimsical, it's a joke, and it's just acknowledge it first now and then figure out how you think the best way to deal with it, because everyone will have a different opinion on how to break it, but it should
Right.
be broken.
It's easy to talk about that. When you talk that you want to destroy reservation, you come from a space of privilege.
That's true.
More than often, you come from a space of privilege. The debate that you should give a rural, you should give monetary, economic
correct.
reservation is so flawed. Because firstly, you don't give one fuck about poor people.
That's true.
Right, because I will tell you the majority of poor people in this country are marginalized people, are from Dalit communities, are from minority communities. You don't give one fuck about them.
Yeah.
Second, if you give so much of a fuck about economic reservation, why is there like 20% of management quota? You could be here. You know do you know how it feels to be told that you don't deserve to be here? That you don't deserve to be in a place? That happens.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're talking in class and this one kid will get up and say, yeah, but they don't deserve. I got more marks. You don't deserve to be here. Imagine being a place and being told that you do not deserve to be here. That fucks with you. That's crazy.
Yeah. Done. Okay. One second. No, keep rolling. Yeah, so that kind of helps me talk about what I want to talk about next, which is like I'm a huge fan of your all different types of your artwork, like whether it's graphic design series or illustrations, I mean if you count them differently, or your poetry that I've seen, like comic kind of stuff that you've started recently. But your very pointed anti-caste approach that you had in this, I don't know if you've been able to be that anti-caste with your work elsewhere, which is I think what you also referred to, why this is important to you. Do you plan, like, firstly I'm sure this is also something that comes from inside and you might not plan to do another piece, but is there anything else that is along a similar topic?
Again, when you're talking about subjects like that, it's important to not do it on a trend basis.
Correct.
It's important to research. I'm learning about myself, I'm learning about society, and I'm constantly researching. That's just how my work is. I'm making my work to make a point.
Correct.
It's not like, oh, acha dikhta hai, double tap. Right? It's never been that for me. Like
I
that's
agree.
a personal choice with
I
like
agree.
artists. Like I've drawn like sunflowers and shit. Like
Yeah.
one of my most viral works is this drawing of sunflowers, which I do not know why people like. You bought it.
The sunflower one?
You bought the card at the Zine Fest. Wasn't
Wait,
that?
why do I not remember this? I'm blanking out.
Okay.
But probably, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I make art like that, and I make art that's important to me.
Yeah.
And almost always, I'm trying to push out something that I want to say.
Correct.
And my art to me is a journey. You
Correct.
can trace how I've evolved as a person and my greater understanding of the world through my
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
Right. So when we talk about like anti-caste systems, I'm not like I'm definitely an illustrator mainly, but on Instagram I talk a lot about like other like I'm constantly talking on my stories,
Yeah.
and I do critique a lot of things that are happening in society.
Yep.
And but like sometimes you can't always churn out work,
Hmm.
and you have to so much
This
thought
is
goes
true, man.
into
it's,
it.
It's a lot of it is
You
internal.
obviously know
Before it
that.
comes out,
Right.
you're processing life
Right.
and your stance on it, the information.
How people are going to see it,
Yeah,
right?
it's a.
And I sometimes it's just like too much pressure.
Yeah, I feel
Yeah,
it.
but like I'm thinking, I'm working on this. I'm working with a classmate who also comes from the Dalit community, and she was doing this project in class. Like we have projects, and she was doing one about why reservation should not be removed, and like why is reservation good, and what are the
This is like a research paper? Or
yeah,
is
like,
it like
it's like a opinion
Okay, got
research
it.
paper.
Got it.
And I was thinking, yeah, probably we both could work and probably convert that into a zine. Because
Oh,
when
sick.
I post about this stuff, there are a lot of people who genuinely want to know
Yeah.
why do I think caste reservations should still exist?
Yeah.
Because you know what? We come from like these biased families where your parents have all your life told you कि मतलब ये कास्ट रेजर्वेशन बुरी बात है, बकवास है, निकाल दो,
Yeah.
देश अच्छा हो जाएगा,
Yeah.
गवर्नमेंट में लोगों को जॉब मिल जाएंगे. They
Yeah.
keep telling you when you've been told that ever since you're like in the first standard. That's just how you know. But I've genuinely got queries from people, and even though it's in some part of my head is just like, this is not my job.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to educate you about this.
Yeah.
But some people genuinely want to know, and I think if I could make like a clearer, understandable,
Right.
relatable
Way of
way of understanding
the idea
why
that-
it's so important.
Yeah.
So that's in
Maybe
the
at
works.
some point you'll
yeah,
see that.
it is like it's in the research stage. Yeah.
Awesome. And I want to know in terms of poetry, do you have like particular ambition?
I mean, I
Or
keep
just as it goes?
very angry person. I write best when I'm angry.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of my work is like I recently wrote a poem on Instagram. It was about how my dad's Catholic, my mom's Hindu, and people get confused with my name. And
This was a couple of weeks ago.
yeah, right.
Yeah, I think I
Yeah.
read this one.
So there was a poem about that. I'm really trying to like understand my identity better. There's like this poem about me being from Kerala, and there's so much to explore,
Got it.
honestly.
Absolutely.
So I'm like, I write. I'm not a regular writer. I
Alright.
won't write every week or every month.
Do you feel good or bad or neutral to being pigeonholed as just a visual artist?
Illustrator, hate
Yeah,
it, hate it,
Yeah?
hate it so much. I don't want to, like sometimes I'm in conflict with my head because I feel like I'm a better writer and poet than I'm a visual artist.
What?
The thing with my visual art.
I'm not against the idea. It's just that you're so
Yeah,
good at that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But the thing with my visual art is that I think I'm a good like design sense, and like my drawing skills in itself aren't the greatest. But I know to play around with colors and stuff really
Like
well.
sensibilities,
And my
yeah,
words
yeah.
add so much to my work.
Yeah, that's true. The
Right.
context of what you're doing
Right.
and the way you explain the context.
Explain. It's so important.
You're right.
Right.
That's helped
And
me be a lot more
I do
appreciative
not
of.
often get called a poet, or I do not get called for like poetry stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
I think maybe you have to do one of those viral unerased poetry. Shout out unerased poetry. You have to be on unerased to be a poet. But yeah,
Shout out Aranya.
shout out Aru. So I just want to end this by once again saying thank you and for bearing with this and for genuinely like I wasn't expecting or like I was glad you were coming, but you've actually contributed a lot of important points to a narrative which needs to be countered, and
Lad.
I hope whatever 53 58 people watch this, can
I
kind
hope
of
more people will
share
watch
it.
it. Don't worry.
Please share it. She's not going to watch it because she doesn't want to hear her voice.
Yeah, I sound
But you can
pathetic.
still
I
share
don't
it.
sound like this.
But thanks, and I want to know what are you going to plug on this 58 view show?
58 views show. I have a store online. It's called artwhoring.com. Just like go on artwhoring.com, right? And I have like 2 t-shirts. So check that out.
Oh yo, get the merch. She has how do you describe your logo? Like, I find that really fascinating.
It's the insane prince. I had some.
Crumbling.
It's a crumbling crazy princess. Yes, that's who she is.
Correct. It's a very dope design. It's like this emblem stitch. It's a stitch.
It's embroidered.
Embroidered. I have no clue what I'm talking about. It's good material. Get it. Thank you, Priyanka.
Thanks, Ankur.
Thanks for watching. Peace.